Evelio Siller, who's our area operations manager for the dam. Karla Benitez is going to be talking about the repairs that we're going to be making to Amistad Dam. Delbert here is our hydrologist, and he's going to be talking about what's happening with the hydrology and what's happening to the water sources in the river. And then we also have Demetrius Gaines, who is our assistant area operations manager. And God, I keep wanting to revert your first name and your last. Is Dead? Kevin Dead? Okay, very good. I keep wanting to call him Kent. I keep wanting you call Devin Kent, but it's Kevin Dent, who's one of our general counsel. And then Isela Canava, we all work for Isela because Isela's in charge of operations. And she and 2/3 of the IBWC employees report to her. So we're always working for her because most of our work is in the operations area. We also have here our public affairs team, Frank Fisher and Frankie Piñon. And then our security back there, Captain Martinez. And I don't know if you're a captain, but head of our chief of security, Rainbottom? Ransbottom, yes, yes. So I'm kind of impressed with myself that I remember all these names. But anyways, please take a seat. I also want to, so as many of you know, we are a federal agency. We have a U.S. section, but we also have a Mexican section. Si se pueden levantar los de la sección mexicana. This is our team, Ingeniero Peña and his team that are also responsible for the Mexican side of our operations. So I'm really grateful that they're here. We're trying to do more collaborative approach in our presentations. Gracias. And let me tell you, they throw the best parties ever. So if you ever want to go to one of their Christmas parties, it's the best of all of the offices along the border. So Ingeniero Peña ya es testigo que estoy reconociendo que su oficina es la mejor de toda la frontera. So anyways, let's go on ahead and get started. So the handouts that we have here, one of the things that we've really prided ourselves on is increasing the transparency of the agency amongst all of the communities. And so that transparency includes a newsletter that was sent out by Evelio, our area operations manager, and we have a copy there. If you're not on our distribution list, we do have a QR code there so you can get on our distribution list of what we achieved in 2024. The other thing is I talked about an overview fact sheet about all of the infrastructure that we are entrusted to manage. I call ourselves the Bureau of Reclamation on the border. And why is that important to highlight? Because one of the things that I've done is really educate both the administration, the past administration, as well as the current administration, as well as members of Congress, that our agency is not about diplomacy. Our agency is not just about diplomacy. It's about operating important infrastructure. Can anyone guess in the audience who's not an IBWC employee, how does the conservation capacity at Amistad Dam rank in all of the dams in the United States? And there are thousands of dams in the United States. Can anybody take a guess? Throw out a number. All right, Shara, we're going to pick on you because you're the city manager. Okay, so the first one is Glen Canyon Dam over on the Colorado River. The second one is Hoover Dam. Ours is ranked 11th in conservation capacity. Okay, it is almost the sole source of water for the entire region from Amistad all the way down to the Brownsville area. There are other sources, but it's the primary source for the region. And so one of the things that we're here to talk about is what are the repairs that we're doing to Amistad Dam? And this is a shared responsibility between the United States and Mexico. So there's another fact sheet here that you can take. And I want to thank Mayor Ariola for hosting us, by the way. And Sean, if he ever needs any private briefing, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to accommodate his schedule, okay? But so this has a schedule, and we'll be talking about that because we have some exciting news. This dam was determined to be DSAC 2, which is dam safety modification, or dam safety, what was the A and the C stand for? Oh, action classification, yeah, action classification 2. There's 5 classifications, and we are at 2, which is considered potentially unsafe. And it's been categorized at that level for over 20 years, almost 30 years. And so now we have the funding, and we have we're doing the design. Mexico is, and we'll talk about how that design is being done to start construction. So this is really good news that now we're going to be able to mitigate the seepage issues at this dam. And she'll talk about some of the issues that are going on. If you look at the fact sheet, there's a sinkhole, and these are some of the issues that are going on at the dam. And then finally, the other thing that we've done, and you can take a look at this, is our safety of dams fact sheet. We are responsible for doing an inspection on our dams every 5 years. And up until recently, this is another one of the achievements that have been going on in the last 3.5 years, is that this agency was really in a reactive mode in terms of maintaining our infrastructure. When you have a car and you maintain a car, every single component in your car is inventoried and has an O&M plan. So you know what to do at 50,000 miles on your car, what to do at 75,000 miles. We don't have this at this agency. So we established an asset management office. We funded it, we staffed it, and we have a consultant and we can present that at a follow-up meeting that is working towards inventorying the components of all of our infrastructure and putting it on an O&M, an operations and maintenance plan, and putting it on and purchasing a computer system so that we can actually go from a reactive maintenance to a proactive maintenance of our dams. Now, like I mentioned, when I started at the agency, our construction budget for the 2 dams, 2 wastewater treatment plants, 500 miles of levees, maintaining the floodplain, maintaining our ports of entry, maintaining our 800 boundary markers was $32 million a year. $32 million a year. And so at that time, when I started in August of 2021, we had $200 million of unobligated funds. So who wants to give you more funding if you cannot obligate what you have? Okay, so in the last 3 years, we have obligated almost $350 million worth of construction. And because of that, last year, Congress authorized $156 million, so they increased our baseline. This year, we got an additional $250 million from a supplemental, and that was a huge boost for us. And so because of that, we were really confident that we have the funding needed to do the seepage corrections at Amistad Dam. So I know I've stolen all of you presenters' thunder, but I wanted to kind of give you an overview of what we're going to be reviewing today. There's going to be a lot of information. We will be recording it, and you can always go back and listen to it. There will be a test afterwards, right? So we do want to make sure that all of you can absorb as much as possible. And this is part of what we want you to walk away knowing, that correcting the issues at Amistad Dam, protecting this community is really an important element of our work. It is a priority. So I don't know who's next. Is it Karla? Okay, Miss Karla Benitez, she's gonna be presenting what we're going to be doing at Amistad Dam. She is the engineer in charge of this project. Take it away, Miss Karla.
Good afternoon. How's everybody? Well, thank you for this opportunity to meet and speak with you all today. My name is Karla Benitez. I'm a civil engineer with IBWC, and today I will be speaking about the Amistad Dam Safety Mitigation Plan. First, I would like to go and have an overview about the Amistad Dam. The dam is located on the international boundary on the Rio Grande, about 11.81 miles north of the cities of Del Rio, Texas, and Ciudad Acuña, Coahuila, in Mexico. It is the second international storage dam jointly built by the United States and Mexico, pursuant to the 1944 Water Treaty. Its primary purpose is water storage, but it is also used for flood damage, for electricity generation, fishing and recreation activities, and also serves as an international port of entry. The total length of the dam is approximately 6 miles, which 1.81 miles is in the US and 4.23 miles is on the Mexican side. As the commissioner stated, the conservation capacity is the 11th largest in the US with 5.3 million acre feet. It is important to note that the dam is founded on limestone bedrock that is karstic material. And what is karstic material? Karstic material is a type of rock that it tends to dissolve with the action of water, and it creates geological features such as sinkholes or caverns, voids. So please keep that in mind. Before we dive into the dam issues and safety measures, I would like to go through some of the events of Amistad Dam. And on this slide, I would like you to see in the middle of the table or the middle of the timeline, the 1994 and 2004 period. During this period, there was a severe drought and several sinkholes were identified, right? On the upstream side of the dam on the Mexican side. There was dye testing conducted, and it was confirmed that the connection, right, between the upstream and the downstream were connected. And these led to a series of grout holes being drilled on the upstream side of the toe and the center line of the dam on the Mexican side, everything on the Mexican side. We continue doing geological geophysical studies. We installed monitoring wells. A binational joint technical advisory group was formed in 2008, which consisted of US and Mexican technical experts. This group conducted an abbreviated risk assessment and concluded that the dam, what the commissioner just said, that the dam posed significant risk and was assigned as a Dam Safety Action Classification Rating 2, or DSAC number 2, which indicates that the dam is potentially unsafe. Just to know that the classification rating goes from 5 to 1 being the most severe. We're number 2 right now. The findings of the panel led to further studies, the Dam Safety Modification Study, the Dam Safety Modification Report. These help to identify and recommend a risk management plan. And these risks were limited. We were able to identify that these risks were in a 2,000-meter portion of the Mexican side. So if you see on the map to the right, that is the portion, the green line. You'll see the 8 on the very left, 6, and then 5 plus 0, 0, 0. That's the stationing. Okay, so let's talk about sinkholes, water sinkholes. Sinkholes are cavities in the ground, particularly found in limestone bedrock that is caused by dissolution of water, and then it creates routes where the water basically disappears underground. This slide shows sinkholes from 1994 to 2023. I have pictures on the left, so you can have the idea of the size of the sinkholes, the depth. They were pretty big. The map shows you that most of the sinkholes are concentrated on the upstream side of the Mexican side, in that stationing, 6+000 to 8+000, and then there's a table at the bottom. On the top row, it shows you the year that the sinkhole was found. The bottom one shows the number of sinkholes found in that year. So in 1994, we identified 10 sinkholes, and so on, right? 1995, 1, and so on. After 1994, we didn't find so many. However, over those 29 years, we found a total of 39 sinkholes. This slide shows additional sinkholes identified in 2024, about a year ago, actually. During the 5-year dam safety inspection site visit in January of 2024, IBWC and their technical experts were looking at the dam, and that's where they identified some of the sinkholes. The sinkholes were exposed when the reservoir water level was lowered due to ongoing Mexican water releases. By the end of these water releases in March, a total of 16 sinkholes were identified, as marked on the yellow box to your right. The technical advisors inspected the new sinkholes, and they concluded that they do not possess a immediate risk to the dam. Although they are closer, I don't know if you can see the photo on the left, the bottom one, they are closer to the embankment, but the technical advisors told us it's not a risk because of the original construction. There were some routing on the upstream toe of the dam, so there was no seepage concern. Our advisors also gave us a procedure to treat the sinkholes. If you follow the pictures from the top to bottom, left to right, you'll see the sinkhole on the very first picture. And then we try to clean out the sinkhole. We excavate because we want to know the depth and the extent of the sinkhole. We do try to clean it up just to see what is the extent and the dimensions. And then you can see at the bottom that big hole, right? So that is the cleanup. And then we backfill with granular material. We extend the backfill beyond the perimeter, above the natural ground level of the opening. And then we place riprap, very last photo you can see. And then on top of it, we do construct a concrete marker with the number that the sinkhole is identified. Every sinkhole is identified by a number. And we do this. We do have this procedure just in case there's activity in the sinkhole. The material will go downward the sinkhole, and that's the way that we monitor if there's any activity. Okay, so in summary, sinkholes pose a potential risk to the structural stability of the dam. We still have the same DSEC rating, classification 2, potentially unsafe. That has not changed. The classification, so the classification is due to potential economic damage and population at risk. The dam has the potential to cause flood damage downstream, putting 400,000 people at risk of flooding. Additionally, it would also affect the water supply, the recreation, hydropower, fish and wildlife in case of a failure. To lower the risk of Amistad, the Joint Expert Panel used the Dam Safety Modification Study process to develop a viable risk reduction plan to achieve a tolerable risk guidelines as quickly and cost effectively. And in October of 2022, there was a binational meeting where it was agreed to proceed with a composite cutoff wall to your right as a recommended risk management plan for Amistad. While the composite cutoff wall alternative has the highest cost, it also represents the greatest risk reduction and meets all the tolerable risk guidelines established by the DSMS as the permanent solution. This alternative, the composite cutoff wall, consists of a two-line grout curtain and the concrete cutoff wall. I'm using those figures just so we can visualize how the void or the water goes through. The left one is a top view of the dam, so you'll see that the voids go from upstream to downstream. And then we have the profile of the dam on your right where the voids go underneath the dam embankment. The composite cutoff wall is designed to intercept and cut off the flow of the water through the karstic bedrock foundation below and through the embankment core. As already stated, it consists of the two-line grout curtain and the concrete cutoff wall. The first measure in the construction is the grout curtain with two parallel lines of holes downstream and upstream, and they are drilled from the crest, backfilled with pressurized cement grout to fill cavities. This will allow the refinement of the concrete cutoff wall depths and extents. It will serve as a flow barrier upstream and downstream of the cutoff wall alignment, and this is to prevent collapsing while we are doing the cutoff wall construction. It creates exploration profiles of the dam to determine the type of the rock, and it serves as a guide to design the future cutoff wall. Then the concrete cutoff wall follows with excavating a series of panels excavated from the crest to and between the two grout curtains in a primary and secondary sequence. And I have a very simple animation here so you can see how it goes. So we said the grout curtain goes first, and we start on the upstream side by drilling from the crest to a depth that it needs to be determined by the designer. Then the bores are drilled.
Look, a dam.
The bores are drilled in a primary secondary sequence, as you can see on your bottom left. So we have the primary boring first, and then we come back and we do the secondary boring in the middle of the primary. If, depending on the borings, if there's a lot of voids or there was a lot of cement grout going in, we might go and have a third boring in between the primary and secondary, and so on. It also, if you see the profile of the dam, those borings have to have an inclination. And then we do the same thing on the downstream, from top to bottom, in a primary and secondary sequence, and with inclination. Then the concrete cutoff wall follows by excavating a series of panels from the crest between the two grout lines. And as the same as the grout curtain, they do follow a primary and secondary sequence. Concrete gets pumped from the bottom to top, and then we remove the equipment, and that's it. The primary and secondary sequence of the cutoff wall is we do a panel, we excavate here, place concrete top to bottom, and then there's a gap, right? So this is primary, the one installed, the gap will be the secondary. And then we continue with the primary, we excavate, we place the concrete all the way to the top, and so on. And then we come back to those gaps. We excavate, and then we place the concrete again. That's the secondary panel until we have a complete concrete wall. Okay, so the U.S. and Mexican section of the IBWC are committed to implement and fund its share of the cost for the permanent solution for Amistad Dam. On December 10th of 2024, the United States and Mexico signed an agreement for the composite cutoff wall project to enhance the structural safety of Amistad Dam, which is minute 332. According to this minute, the distribution of total cost between the two countries will follow minute 210, where we share 56.2% for the United States and then 43.8% for Mexico. And I just want to say that the Commission is very aware that a detailed design needs to be determined, the construction specifics, right? And these construction specifics might impact the cost and the schedule. Let's see the schedule a little bit. January of 2024, a contract was awarded to assist the Commission in developing the bidding package and the scope of work for the design of the composite cutoff wall. The solicitation was posted on May 16, 2024, awarded in September 17, 2024. The tentative completion date of the design is March 2024, in a month. And then we'll follow with the solicitation and award of the grout curtain construction and cutoff wall design, having a target date to start construction in July of 2025. And then the cutoff wall construction would follow in January of 2027. Now, please know that these project dates depend on the completion of the design and the availability of the funding, meaning that if we don't receive the complete funding, the cutoff wall construction might be pushed to the right. How am I doing with time? I don't see the time. No. Okay, to finalize, we have a path forward and some recommendations. So we definitely have to finalize the design to determine those specifics for the construction details to refine our costs, our estimated costs. We are to use existing fundings to start the construction of the grout curtain. We need to obtain necessary funding for the rest of the work, such as the cutoff wall section part, and to start that work so we can ensure that the complete composite cutoff wall is built. And then follow few recommendations to continue routine monitoring programs of the dams, automated and conventional instrumentation, ensure continuous information sharing between the two countries, and to maintain and update the list of officials identified in the Amistad Dam Emergency Action Plan. This completes my presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
Is there a maximum lake elevation that, or minimum, however you might say that, maximum lake elevation that the water can rise during the beginning of the grouting construction in July 2025, I think, if I read that correctly?
So you're talking about pool restrictions.
Yes.
And yes, and that has to be identified during the design. So that's where we're waiting.
And that's important to know that there's an interest in that because we can definitely share that information at the time. The good thing is that even though we just had an inspection on our dams done, and there was no reduction in conservation capacity that they asked for us so far, right? So these are things. Now, like Karla said, what's going to affect kind of some of these decisions? I don't know if I can go back, yeah. Just one slide, right there. Factors impacting cost is, there is no sonar or picture of what's happening under the dam. We don't know how big the caverns are. We don't know how small the caverns are under the dam. Okay, so the idea is as we go in and bore that grout curtain, as the cement goes in, we're going to see the volume that's going in, how the cavern's starting to get get filled up. So at that point, we're gonna know the depth of the grout curtain, as well as, and that's gonna tell us how deep the cutoff well needs to go, and the starting and ending limits, right? So there's going to be a lot of questions that are gonna be answered in the first 2 years of construction, and we will make sure and come out periodically to update the group as to any sort of changes that could potentially impact that. Yes,
So
sir.
are you gonna start this at the deepest part of the dam, or are you gonna start it at the shallowest part?
Do we have that answer
The
yet?
deepest? What do you mean with the deepest?
So are you gonna start next to the river channel?
Yeah, like we're gonna start on the left or on the right?
I'm gonna go back. Well, I have a map right there, but it's kind of small.
So are we gonna start over here where there's no water, or are we gonna start over here where there's more water?
Are you gonna start the yellow or the red?
Yes, basically. So the length of the cutoff wall is gonna be this entire length, more than likely, right?
Yes, so
Yeah.
it's 2,600 meters.
Right, and so right now, the design, so we're waiting for the design to be done in March, and this design, we will be able to understand kind of if we're gonna, how the project is gonna be rolled out. So I don't think we can answer that question yet.
I don't think I can, because I think that will be depending on the contractor, on the construction contractor, not too much on the designer. They might give a recommendation, but maybe it's the construction contractor who decides where to start.
So again, we'll share that with you. I mean, we're writing down all these questions because that gives us a lot of insight as to what people are gonna be interested for us to be informing the public on. Okay?
They had a question, somebody, Chris, pertaining to the sinkholes. Do you know where the water is going? Is there a way to track it or measure how much we are losing? So this is right here. So we have the sinkholes on the top, on the upstream side of the dam, and then they do pop up on the other side, on the downstream, as a spring. The measurements, we said 2,000 liters per second.
And that varies depending on the pool, reservoir elevation.
So we do know,
Karla,
how,
Yes, we do have the flow rate that goes through the seepage.
okay, so I don't know if they're hearing here in the public. So a couple of things is that I want to first recognize the work that the Mexican section is doing on this, because they have very good, they do very well. One, they monitor the sinkholes to see if they're growing, they're moving, and all of that. So it's very well documented. The other thing is that they've identified where that water's coming up on the other side through a process of dye at one point, so that they could see where it was popping up on the other side. Obviously, we don't know where every drop is going, but we do have some estimates as to what is being lost at the dam. The likelihood is that it flows back into the river because of the fact that it is the lowest point there. So as to whether we're losing water in the whole area is probably unlikely. It's all staying within that watershed.
Commissioner,
Yes.
this is Ray, if I may jump in.
Please.
Yeah, also in the specific question about, do we know where it's going and is there a way of measuring? We have piezometers all the way through on the US side and the Mexican side that continually measure any flow that's coming through. So that's how we know if there's an increase of flow, if there's a reason to be concerned. And at this point over the time, we haven't seen any change in the parameters of the water that are coming through, which kind of led our technical advisors to say that's why the sinkholes that we found, the new ones here in the last year, weren't posing that critical problem, because there was no increase in flow. And we do have springs on the other side where we're actually measuring the water coming through. And as Commissioner mentioned, eventually it does end up back into the river as it's flowing down, because they come up in springs and then that flows down natural channels, arroyos that kind of get back to the river. So we have that monitoring process where we have automatic readings of our piezometers, so we know the flow rates that are going through there, and we have manual readings as well.
And that's our principal engineer, Ray Macias, responding to that. Any other questions on this? Okay, I do want to let people know that the port will be closed during construction. Okay, and we will give plenty of notice to the public as to when that timeline will be. Is there another question before we move on to the next one?
What is the estimated cost of this project?
So the estimated cost of the project varies between 276 million and 80 million, or 80 million and 276. Why that huge difference is because we don't know how deep we need to go. And until we
What do you
get
think
in
it's
there
paying for
and
that?
start putting the grout curtain in,
Taxpayers,
we will know how deep that
The grout curtain. and
right,
the
will
cutout
need to
needs
go in. And then who is the design engineer? Do you know who the design is?
Techno project.
Techno Project is a design engineer right now. Obviously, we don't have a construction company because that will be bid out competitively and internationally.
Yes, and I just want to point out, the Mexican section was the one who awarded the contract, so it's under Mexican section who awarded to Techno Project.
Yes, but it does include, there is a team that includes both sections.
Yes.
Both sections, as well as our advisor is the Corps of Engineers, and so they are the ones that are advising us every step of the way, and are part of the procurement and selection process. Do we have contact info for the designer engineer? We can definitely post that. And what is the Army Corps district? Is it Galveston? No.
It's a Tulsa district.
Oh, they're Tulsa
That's
district.
a center, yeah, it's a center of expertise for dams.
Okay. Okay. Oh, yes, sir.
I believe I saw the US has most of the financial responsibility based on the previous minute. If they have majority of the costs associated, do they also have the majority of the decision making on which it comes down to heads or tails, so to speak?
Let me talk a little bit about the division of costs. Why does the United States pay 56% and Mexico pay 44%? Because we own 56.4% of the storage in the dam. So that's why we're responsible for that portion. With regards to the decision making, so we've been really lucky because if anything, when it comes to technical decisions, we have always been synced up on it, okay? And so in that sense, we definitely are building consensus. We may fight on a lot of other things, but on engineering decisions, we are adhering to the highest level of codes. Mexico's construction codes are very similar. They do for dams. Those are international codes that are common in both countries. So we haven't had any issues with differences in that sense. Is that helpful, Anthony? Oh, yeah. Okay. Very good. So why don't we go on ahead and go to the next part of the presentation? Let's give Karla a round of applause. She did an excellent job. Thank you, Karla.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next part of the presentation, our hydrologist, Delbert Humberson, will be presenting today. And this comes to answer the question is, why are the lake levels so low? Okay, when I started at the IBWC, when I had my first public meeting here in this area, it was one of the questions that I got from some very well-respected irrigators was, we're always talking about Mexico's deliveries. What is happening with the hydrology on the U.S.? So, and Delbert will explain that. So this is going to not only present what's happening on the hydrology on the Mexican side, but also what's happening on the hydrology on the U.S. side. Now, This gives no opinion as to what's happening upstream. This is just pure gauging station data. This is not a hydrologic study. This is not, it doesn't look at drought. It doesn't look at changes in temperature or any of that. And why do I highlight that? Because on the Colorado River, the one in Wyoming that goes all the way down to California, the Bureau of Reclamation has a lot of science there. And they have determined that based on that science, the increase in temperature in that region has really diminished the runoff coming off from the mountain. And I'll give you an example. 3 years ago, the region got like 85% of snowpack. So you would have gotten, in theory, 85% of expected runoff. They only got like 32%. The next year, they got 90% of snowpack, and they only got about 65% of the expected runoff. And then last year, they had a record snow, and they had 180% of above average snowpack, and they got 110% of runoff. So what is happening, right? And so they've determined, because they have scientists that look at soils and looks at temperature, is that they've determined that the increase in temperature has made the soils drier, so you have more infiltration. That the increase in temperature has made the winters shorter, so there's more vegetation, and vegetation takes up more water. That the increase in temperature has also caused more evapotranspiration, and that also wind patterns have changed and have blown the snow in a different direction. Okay, so all of this has affected runoff. We don't have that level of science on this river, but it is something that we're definitely advancing in terms of sharing with constituents what is happening to the river, because the river is the primary source of water for all of these communities, like 3 million from both sides of the border, 3 million people, right? And so really understanding so that you can advocate for yourself as a community with the federal government, with state government on investments and diversification of water is really important. And I was really happy to see how this legislative session in Texas, water is an important topic. State Senator Perry, who is a renowned advocate from the Panhandle of Texas for funding water, has publicly said, Texas has less water, more people, and they're 20 years behind the time in water supply. And so that has been a great result, because this legislative session, water has been considered an emergency item on the agenda, on the legislative agenda, which means that they can start moving legislation through the legislature on funding water projects. So what Delbert is going to be talking about is kind of what's been happening in the region. Now, we recognize that Mexico is severely in arrears in their water deliveries. And I've been briefing the new administration on this, and we are continuing to advocate for deliveries from Mexico, for a plan as how they're going to make up that shortfall. And we're also exploring other options with the new administration. So I want to make sure that the public understands that we are really fighting to get water to the region. Go ahead, Delbert.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a quick question for the audience. Are you guys okay if I wear my beanie? I get cold, and it's chilly today. Thank you. Some of y'all are sympathetic out there. Frank, you said the presentations were on here? Oh, downloads?
What did you do with my window?
I know. So while we wait for this to come up, I'm a hydrologist. I'm in the water accounting division. And what we do in water accounting is just what the name sounds like. We account for every drop of water entering the main stem of the Rio Grande and how much water each country owns in the international reservoirs, including Amistad and Falcon. We also support the agency of flood operations and various other hydrology studies. And what I'm going to talk about today is really a story of past, present, and future. And by past, I mean recent past. We're going to look at the most recent 40 years and look at inflow trends into both Amistad and Falcon. And this is a study done by my friend and colleague, Adrian Cortez, whose name just popped up on the screen. Thank you. He's our lead hydrologist at the agency. And then from there, we're going to move into the present. After these inflow trends, and this analysis will end in 2020, which is the end of the last 5-year cycle, how did that set us up for the current 5-year cycle? Where are we in the current 5-year cycle in terms of deliveries and reservoir storage? And spoiler alert, it's not great. And then looking forward, what are we doing moving forward? Namely, the signing of Minute 331, which just happened at the end of last year, and how we hope to leverage that to increase the deliveries we're getting from Mexico. Before we get into the analysis, though, I think it's important to understand where these numbers come from. These aren't numbers we're pulling out of our pocket. These are numbers that come from our gauging stations. We've been gauging rivers for a long time at IBWC. Our gauging program goes back to the 30s, but some of the gauges that we took over actually have records that go back into the late 1800s. For example, in El Paso, it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest gauge in Texas. It starts in the late 1800s. It's pretty amazing. It's a great, rich data set we have to draw from. Moving forward to the signing of the 1944 Water Treaty, we had to develop an accounting procedure that both countries agreed to, and that got put in place in the 50s. So this is a methodology that we do. Each country does independently. We compare our results, and we make sure we're in agreement, and we move forward. And through this accounting process, we track the water. The 1944 treaty starts at Fort Quitman, Texas. If you look on the map where the cursor is, that's Fort Quitman there. That's our gauge. That water is 50-50. And then we track that water as we go downstream, and we look at how much water each country is pulling out, how much water is coming in from the different tributaries. It's all gauged and measured. There's also stuff that isn't measured. We track EVAP, and from there we calculate how much water belongs to the United States, how much water belongs to Mexico as it enters the reservoir. And we do that from there all the way down to the Gulf. And so what do we get from our established accounting? Well, what we get is for each month, here's the total inflow into Amistad, here's the total inflow into Falcon, and it's 60% United States, maybe 40%, depends on the numbers, right? That's what we get. But as we've been in this period of low storage, we wanted to dig a little deeper. It's not enough to just know this is the total amount of water coming in. Let's get more granular with it. How much is coming from all the different sources? We need to better understand this problem. So that was the starting point for us. What else do we get from our accounting? I already talked about evaporative losses. Yeah, okay, so where's our water coming from? Well, let's start with Amistad. If you're not familiar with the 44 treaty, well, it spells out where our water comes from, and that's it there on the screen. Off the Rio Conchos, which is right here, we get 1/3 of that water. It comes in from Mexico. That is by treaty. By 1/3, I mean the water that hits the Rio Grande main stem. Once it hits the main stem, 1/3 of that is by rights, belongs to the United States. We also get 100% of Terlingua Alamito creeks as we move downstream. That's these here. That's in the Presidio area. And we get down here is Amistad. We get 100% off the Pecos, 100% off the Devils, and also 100% off of Good Enough Springs. I'm just curious, show of hands, who here has heard of Good Enough Springs? Wow, excellent. Yeah, for those that don't know, Good Enough Springs is now submerged, right? It's underneath the lake. But we do have an accounting process in place to make sure we're still getting our water off of those springs. So now, if you look at this map, there's a whole lot of basin up here, and I just named a few. And you can imagine when it rains, it's not just coming down past those measured tributaries. It's also coming in on the unmeasured tributaries. And by treaty, that is split 50-50. And that's the last source of water we have entering Amistad that belongs to the United States. So what do we know from the accounting? I already described it for you. We know the total inflows into each reservoir, and that's ultimately what gets assigned to users in each country. Now, IBWC, we don't control how water is distributed within the countries. We just report to Mexico and Texas, this is how much water you own, and their respective water management agencies will then distribute it to their users. What are we doing now that's different? Well, what Adrian did is he took those inflows and split it into its different components. And it's an estimate, but it's a great place to start, and it tells its own story. So of those total inflows entering Amistad, how much of it came off the Conchos as it's moving down and evaporating away as it moves way down? How much of it actually made it into the reservoir? How about Terlingua Creek, Alamito Creek? We need to understand this problem. To understand it, we need to know, where is that water coming from? This is what it looks like. Now, I'm going to throw a lot of graphs on the screen. I'll kind of draw your attention where I want it to stay within time constraints, but I'm happy to take questions along the way. I prefer you ask me now while it's on top of your mind than have you hold on to it and forget at the end. So each panel here is a different water source. You can see the top left is labeled Rio Conchos at Amistad. I forget the one in the middle, probably Alamito Creek, because I see Terlingua and there's very little flow coming off Alamito there. The bottom left, I don't know if you guys online can see on my screen, it says you're sharing your screen, so it's blocking the title of that center top graph. But that's Alamito. Bottom left is the Pecos Devils and the Springs inflow, all lumped together. Those pretty much flow straight into the reservoir. And then we have that 50-50 water. The main thing I want you to look at is that bottom right panel. That's the total. If you add them all up together, that's what you get. Moving left to right, it's from 1981 to 2020. You see 4 groupings there, a blue, a green, a red, purple. Those are decadal groupings. So blue is 1981, 1990. Green is the 90s, red is the 2000s, purple is the 2010s. You'll see for each grouping there's a dashed line. That dashed line represents the mean inflow into the reservoir for each of those groups. And what you can see here in 1980, it's higher than it was in the 90s. We had a period of low inflows, sustained period of low inflows. Hold on to that thought because we're going to get back to that later. And then we get here to where we are, 2010 to 2020, setting us up for the current cycle, and it's really low, right? What we also see is a lot of variability from year to year. Each of these represents 10 data points. And you can see it's up, down, up, down, up, down. And this really highlights not only the variability in our basin, but how storm dependent we are, right? And are we good at predicting storms 2 months from now? 2 weeks from now? No. So there's a lot of uncertainty there. Let's get rid of that noise. So what we did here is we're going to take this panel and we're going to group it into total volumes. And that's, we got 4 points. We got 4 decades we're looking at. This is the total volume of water, 14 million acre feet that we got in the 80s coming into Amistad. And that's from all the sources of water belonging to the United States. The ones I named earlier. 1/3 off the Conchos, Devils, Pecos, Terlingua, Alamito, and the 50-50 water. And as we track it through the decades, here's where we were 2010 to 2020. 9.4 million acre feet, or 33% less than we saw in the 80s. Why does that matter? Well, as you heard Commissioner say earlier, our reservoirs aren't holding a 20-year water supply. And what you find in the absence of significant inflows, 2 years, 3 years, there's a precipitous drop in storage. And we'll show that to you in a graph later. So having a sustained period of low inflows over a decade, well, that hurts. We can split that up into its components. So below each point in the green line, we split it up into the orange and blue bar. Orange is the Pecos Devils and Spring. That's the water going straight into the reservoir. Blue is what's coming down the main stem from upstream. So the Rio Conchos, Terlingua, Alamito Creek, the 50-50 water. All that is from our accounting. What's new in our analysis is this graph. We took that main stem water and split it up into its separate components. Now we're starting to learn a little bit more about where this water is coming from. So at the top we have our green line again, that's the total water, right? We just saw that in the last graph, 14 million acre feet coming into the United States in the 80s, 9.4, 2010 to 2020. Let's look at each component. Let's start with the small ones. Terlingua and Alamito Creek, this dark blue and this purple. They barely register on the radar, right, at this scale. But yes, that's 100% United States water, but it's not a whole lot of water compared to the other sources. Alamito doesn't even show up on the bar chart in some of them. The blue, that light blue, you see my cursor now, that's the Pecos Devils and the Spring flow. That's a good chunk of water for us. We do see throughout time, if we compare, it's more or less steady, but in the last decade, it is lower than the decades before. We have a trend line fit to it, and you can see it's almost flat, but it is descending. I should take a moment to emphasize the scope of this analysis, it is just from 1980 to 2020. You keep hearing me say those years. And that's important in any kind of trend analysis because it's very sensitive to your starting and ending points. But right now, those are those decades we're focusing on. And it still matters because this 2010 to 2020 is what set us up for the current 5-year cycle, those 10 years of low inflows. So U.S. inflows more or less held steady but declined slightly off the U.S. tributaries. The green is that 50-50 water. It's a pretty significant chunk of the water coming in. And it has a steeper slope. So we had about 4.5 million acre feet in the 1980s, but that last decade down to 3 million acre feet. How about the Rio Conchos? That's the orange. It dropped nearly in half, from 2.2 million acre feet to 1 million acre feet. Again, we did not look at causality. Is it climate? Is it practices? Is it all the above? Not sure, but what we do know is there's less of it coming in 2010 to 2020. How's it look for Mexico? Well, here's our green line at the top again. This bottom line is Mexico. They're also getting less inflows. Where do they get their water? Well, they get 2/3 off the Rio Conchos, whereas we get 1/3. And then they get their half of the 50-50 water. And they were getting 9 million acre feet in the 80s. And as we go decade to decade, we see it dropping. They're getting 4 million acre feet. For them, it's a 51.8% drop in inflows. For us, it's a 33%. Neither is a nice number to have. What about Falcon? Let's move downstream. If you're not familiar with the treaty, our water in Falcon, we get 1/3 off Arroyo de las Vacas, 1/3 off of Rio Salado, Rio San Diego, Rio San Rodrigo, Rio Escondido. Those are the remaining 5 tributaries that we get 1/3 of the water from Mexico. The United States also gets 100% off of Pinto Creek and San Felipe Creek, which are both right around here. And we also get that 50-50 water. Technically, we also have whatever we release out of Amistad going into Falcon, but that effect has been removed in this analysis. Here's the trends again. Let's just focus on the bottom right. That's the total U.S. inflows. And we see same thing if we compare the most recent decade to the 80s. There's less. We had this huge spike here. That's Hurricane Alex. That was the last major storm we had in the reservoirs that filled them up. But you notice right after Hurricane Alex, we didn't have any inflows coming in at all. This is what it looks like over time in total inflows. So instead of a green line, we have an orange line. Same thing though, 4 million versus 5 million, it's a 21% drop for the United States. So when you ask the question, why are lake levels so low, this is a big part of it. We had a decade of low inflows. In summary, we're looking at, in that most recent decade compared to the 80s, a 33% decrease, which comes out to about 460,000 acre feet annually. 460,000 acre feet. From the U.S. tributaries, those are the ones we get 100% off of. This is for Amistad, so Devils, Pecos. The drop was about 24%. What we got off the Conchos dropped about 51%. That 50-50 water, 38%. In Falcon, it's not as quite as big, the drop, but it's still there, 21% or 110,000 acre feet annually. And if you add those two numbers up together, what do you get? 570,000 acre feet. Mexico's obligation to us is an average of 350,000 acre feet. So it hurts to lose this kind of number. How does this look in terms of deliveries? Actually, let me skip ahead. I should have put this slide first. How does this look in terms of storage? This is Amistad and Falcon ownership trends. Going back, this graph goes back to 1996. Remember, there was a low period of inflows in the 90s. And we had a little bit of some higher inflows in the early 2000s, 2010. And then we've been in a sustained set of low inflows. What we're looking at here, it starts in 96, it goes to 2025. This is a graph we update weekly. It is based on preliminary accounting data, but the trend is still there even with final data. We're looking at percentage of conservation capacity on the y-axis. Blue is United States, red is Mexico. So here in the 90s, during that period of low inflows, both countries are running below 50% capacity in those dams. Got wet, Hurricane Alex is here, 2010. Remember we pointed out right after Hurricane Alex, we had low inflows again, and what happens to those reservoir storages? It dropped. This is what we're talking about when we say we have two years of storage and then 3 years of storage. It drops precipitously. And we've been hanging down low since. Here's where we are now, and if you look at that and extend that line to the left, there aren't many parts of the blue line that low. Yes, sir.
So whenever you're full and you have all that extra capacity, and then you talk about not having the influx in there, but it looks like you pull the lakes harder whenever you're full.
So the change in storage is a factor of two things. Oh, to repeat the question was, when we had a high amount of storage in there, it looked like we were pulling the lakes harder. So first thing I'll say is IBWC doesn't pull it. We respond to the water managers in each country. So TCQ tells us what to pull. For United States users, Conagua tells us what to pull for Mexican users. And they're following their own set of rules that are based on available storage. So I'll make that clear. And then the other thing is change of storage is a factor of pulling and inflows, right? So maybe they're not pulling harder, there's just less inflows coming in. I'm not saying that's what it is because I haven't looked at those numbers specifically, but there's different ways to create a big drop. It's a combination of those two factors. That answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if we look here, where we are today, and we go extend that line to the left, we really haven't been this low except once here early 2000s and since the initial filling of the reservoirs. In fact, the last time the reservoirs were full were 2010. And if you were in the lower valley, I know Anthony, you were there, you heard me say this, but this is something that really hits home for me. My second son was born in 2010, and he made it to high school without us having full reservoirs again. So this is what prompted us to look at that inflow. Why is it this way? And we wanted to spark a discussion amongst our water managers. So any questions on that? I've been throwing a lot of graphs, a lot of numbers at you. Okay, how does this look in terms of deliveries? So if you're not familiar with the 1944 water treaty, the way it works is Mexico's delivery obligation on the Rio Grande is 1.75 million acre feet over a 5-year period, which comes out to an average, keyword average, of 350,000 acre feet a year. So if it's wet, we get more. If it's dry, we get less. But ideally, we hit at least an average of 350,000 acre feet a year. There is no maximum obligation, just a minimum. We just get 1/3 of the water off those 6 named tributaries. On the graph right now, if you remember, that inflow analysis ended in 2020. The current cycle started 2020. So cycle year 1 here that's on the screen, that's 2020. Cycle year 2 is 2021, and so on. Oh, this should say cycle year 5 at the bottom. And when I say 2020, it started in October 2020. So it's October 2020 to October 2021. None of those years are over 350,000 acre feet. None of them. And that translates into us only getting, to date, as of February 8th, 436,000 acre feet, more or less. We are 1 million acre feet below where we would like to be at this point in the deliveries. 1 million acre feet. We're at about 30% of that target. And if we compare it to other cycles, that's what this graph is. And this is a graph we also update weekly on our website. On the y-axis, we have accumulated delivery from Mexico in acre feet. On the x-axis, we have cycle year, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's that 1.75 million acre feet in the upper right. This red dashed line represents the rate at which we should get deliveries if it were to get delivered at a constant rate to meet the minimum. And each of these lines represents deliveries in a different cycle. And you can really split this graph into 2 parts. You got lines that make it all the way to the end and lines that don't. These lines that don't make it to the end, if you don't know, there's a clause in the 44 treaty that says if United States capacity fills up in Amistad and Falcon, we reset the year. There's nowhere to store that water, we're gonna reset the cycle year. And all debt is erased. And that's how the treaty works. But if we don't reset and we run the full 5 years, and Mexico does not meet that minimum obligation up here, the treaty says Mexico has to make up that debt they owe us in the next 5-year cycle and still meet that 5-year cycle's obligation as well. You can imagine if you're in a period of prolonged drought or prolonged low inflows and you didn't have enough inflows to pay off the first obligation, it's going to be hard to pay off that debt and the second obligation with just 1/3 off of those 6 tributaries. And so what we did is we signed an agreement in the 60s, minute 234. And minute 234 is in recognition that, hey, that could be a problem. So you know what? If a cycle ends in a debt, and only when a cycle ends in a debt, the United States can take more than its 1/3 share. Maybe we get 2/3 off Rio Conchos. Maybe we get 100%. That's a commission decision they make. In addition to that, we can also transfer water directly from Mexico to United States in the reservoirs. And at the end of the 2020 cycle, right here, it looks like at the end they didn't make it, but it jumps vertically. And that's because at the very end there, we did a bunch of reservoir transfers to meet their obligation. They also paid off their debt in 2015 during that cycle year. 2015 is this blue line. It didn't quite make it. And so in the next cycle, we enacted Minute 234, and Mexico met their obligations as specified in the treaty. Well, if we look at storage now, oh, that's the old one. I updated it on Friday. I don't know, you didn't get it? Okay. That's okay, we could work with these numbers too. If we look at storage as of February 1, so it's a couple weeks old, remember what I said earlier? We're about 1 million acre feet below where we want to be. If we look at Mexico's total storage, we're not looking at 1 million acre feet available to transfer to us. Right, so it's a little different right now than it was at the end of 2020. Right now, the United States is at 21% capacity, more or less. Mexico's at 12% of their capacity. That's both reservoirs combined. If we look elsewhere in the basin, it's not just in Amistad and Falcon. If we look, and we have this graph, it's updated daily. This is as of February 10th. If we look in Mexico's reservoirs in the Rio Conchos, that's this table here, they're at 20% capacity in the Rio Conchos as well. So there's not much water there for us. If we look in the Middle Rio Grande, so these are the reservoirs that feed between Amistad and Falcon from Mexico, it's at 25%. Not much water there either. Where there is water is down in the lower valley. Marty Gomez, El Cuchillo, Rio San Juan, and Rio Alamo. And there they're at 94, 95%. United States does not get water from those two reservoirs by the treaty, typically, right? That's 100% Mexico's water. Great, I painted like the worst, most horrible picture for you ever, right? Things aren't looking good. Moving forward, what are we doing? What can we do? Well, the big thing we did last year was sign Minute 331. And this gives us a new set of tools that we can use to help get more water from Mexico and help them be proactive in meeting their delivery obligation. So we're not constantly having to wait for a cycle to end in debt, and then we're dealing with a water delivery crisis in the subsequent cycle. Now, this minute was the result of 18 months of negotiations. We can't just unilaterally make things happen on our own, right? We need agreement from Mexico. So there was a lot of negotiation back and forth. Austin, Monterrey, Mexico City, all over the place. And we signed it, and it's the first major agreement we've had on water delivery since 1969. So what does it do? Well, it does a few things. First off, we're going to talk about these work groups. One, it continues support for the policy and hydrology work groups. These are work groups that were established by a previous minute. What are they? Well, the policy work group is actually pretty cool. It consists of representatives, policymakers, water policymakers in both countries. So TCQ is there, Canagua is there. Right? I think we've had representatives from
The governor's office and Secretary of State.
Thank you. Yeah, Governor's Office, Secretary of State. Of course, IBWC is there. And it is a forum where the policymakers can discuss what are our issues, what are potential solutions, what are some maybe other policies that we can do. And to help inform them is the hydrology work group, which I'm part of. And that consists of technical representatives from similar organizations, Canagua, TCQ, Department of Interior, and IBWC, both sections, Mexican and United States. And what we do is, one, facilitate data exchange. If there's technical questions, we'll answer them. But the big task we got, Minute 325, is to develop a binational model to simulate alternate policy scenarios and see what their potential impact are on allocations and reservoir storage. And we're really close to getting 1.0 out now. I've merged all the objects together, Commissioner Giner, and we're working on merging the policy rules. So we expect to have something out this year on that. It's been a lot of years working on it. The other thing Minute 331 did is it established a projects work group. And the idea here, I'm going to steal a phrase you like to use, we're trying to grow the pie, right? If we're running out of inflows, we got to figure out other ways to get water. And the projects work group is going to do that. Their job is to come up with conservation projects or maybe sources of new water, something that can increase the water coming in that we can use. Yes? Yeah, it's just getting off the ground. So the minute that was signed in November, it got the group off, so there's nothing is off the table. The projects are there.
And
Ah, so. But hopefully, as time goes on, we'll have something more to say, but it's just now getting off the ground. The other work group that's getting off the ground is the environmental work group to investigate things of environmental concern, right? And of course, respecting operational obligations in both countries. But there are things there. I know a lot of them actually represent in this area in Big Bend, and there's a lot of interest in groundwater, surface water interaction. And as you saw, spring flow is a big component of what comes into Amistad. So that is of importance. Also continued support for the Lower Rio Grande Water Quality Initiative, which is more focused down near the Gulf, and they're looking at the salinity issues we see down there. I see some people from down there. Hi, Anthony. And so the whole point of that study is to better understand the salinity issues and where that salinity is coming from. But of more interest to this topic today is the tools. So through the policy work group that we mentioned just now, people are like, we need more tools to increase the predictability and reliability of deliveries off the Rio Grande. The way we've been doing is not working. Status quo is not working for us. So in this agreement, some things came out of it. One, Mexico has agreed if there's excess storage on the reservoirs, they're going to release that water down towards the main stem. And if it's the main stem, we get 1/3 of it, right? If it's off those 6 named tributaries. Two, this one's interesting. Mexico, if they're in a debt or really far behind in their deliveries, will consider allocating volumes of water specifically for satisfying their delivery obligation, which is not how they've operated previously. We just get wild water, typically, that comes down the river. I should point out here, nothing can be done unilaterally with these tools. Anything here can only be enacted if the countries agree to do it. But what this minute does is give legal justification for us to take the action. That wasn't there before. The last bullet point there, use of Mexico's portion of 6 named tributaries at any time. We don't have to wait for a cycle to end in a debt now. We could be more proactive at any time. Same thing here, the first bullet point. At any time, we can do a direct transfer of waters. We don't have to wait for a cycle to end in a debt now. That was the limitation with Minute 234. Use of Rio San Juan and Rio Alamo. You saw on that slide earlier, where are we going to find water and storage in Mexico? Rio San Juan and Rio Alamo right now. That's where they have a lot of extra water. And Mexico made an offer to us, and we're actively taking that water as we speak. We are exercising this clause, Minute 331, as we speak. The water is being transferred on a daily basis. Now, these tools are on a pilot run in this minute. We have 5 years to test it, and hopefully we get some results. And we have the option to extend it if both countries agree. So moving forward, what are we doing? Well, one thing, as you heard Commissioner say, is we're pressing Mexico to get us our water. We're pressing them for deliveries. Oh, I got a question here. I'll look at that in just a second. We are pressing them to use this tool. We have an agreement. We have a tool now, Minute 331. Let's use it. And we are pushing them to use all these different things we just described to get us our water. And as Commissioner Hiner mentioned, we are asking them, what's your plan? We are so far in arrears right now, 1 million acre feet. If we go back to that graph, the black line is the current state of deliveries. It's not just far in arrears, it is the worst we have on record going back to the 90s. So. Oh, I got out of this. Well, let me look here, I got a question. Which one is it, Frankie?
No, Shauna has a question. That's the city manager. Shauna.
Oh, yes.
As in Wichita Falls, Texas, they're doing reintroduction of their effluent off their sewer plants into the aquifer. Are other cities along this region looking at the same thing so as to, I would think it would probably negatively impact the flow, but it keeps it more local.
I don't have any personal knowledge of any projects like that. I don't know if you do, Commissioner, but.
So the vast majority of the cities along the border are primarily focused on desal as a diversification method. That's the latest state water plan that has been looked at, but beyond that, I have not seen anybody. It doesn't mean that they're not considering it in this state water plan.
There's just millions of gallons that go downstream every day because of
Right.
runoff off, effluent discharge off of sewer.
Right, and right now, many of those sewer plants are discharging into the river already, right? So they could already be in the system, but any new sources I'm not aware of at this point. What's the other question? Okay, so has the silting between Pecos Confluence and Zubenbuehler Bend affected inflows and evaporation rates, and are there any plans to fix the flow paths? So definitely sediment buildup is things that we've seen in the main stem of the Rio Grande that affect flows. Our lane is only the Rio Grande and the gauging stations where we measure flow. We have no knowledge of what's happening upstream of the river. And I'm thinking there's another compact on the Pecos or in another water master associated with it that's responsible for that. So unfortunately, we can't answer that question. Do we have any other questions? Yes, sir.
You had mentioned in, Delbert, you had mentioned in, minute 330 water grid that, some of the water for those reservoirs are full or 94% capacity on the lower end. And you said we're currently using those, allocations. How are they being used? And obviously, they're not being pumped back up
Right.
this side of the
Right.
Rio. So, what's the process for that and how's that?
Yeah, I'll let you answer that.
So you're right, one of the limitations of taking San Juan Alamo water is it only helps those users downstream. And while that is where a lot of the agriculture is, it doesn't help you guys up here. But the way it's happening is we have a process we design and put in place where TCEQ is getting orders from their users, and they submit to us, to Mexico through the commission, the amount they would like transferred at Amistad Dam, which is a diversion structure we have down there. And so every day we look at their order and we're transferring that amount of water from Mexico to the United States in the accounting process so that the United States can use it. And they're using it for their irrigators.
Well, not necessarily for so let me add a little bit to that. So in South Texas, the irrigation districts also distribute water to the cities. And so right now, the irrigation districts are taking that water, but it is probably, most of it is probably going to the communities down there, not so much for agriculture. It was 120,000 acre feet that Mexico offered to us that we took of that San Juan water. The agricultural region needs over 1 million acre feet, so obviously 120,000 is not gonna solve the agricultural issues down there, and we're very cognizant of that. But what this water does do is it does help with the municipal needs in the region. The other thing that reservoir, that water from those rivers is it cannot be stored because it's downstream of Falcon. So it has challenges as far as how we can accept that water in the region. And I do want to recognize Anthony Sannenbach, who is from the Lower Rio Grande. And I don't know, Anthony, did I miss anything or would you want to add anything?
No, I would just add, as part of the conversation, that, the numbers for ending December, as far as the San Juan water that's been used in the lower valley so far, 57% of that water went towards a municipal use.
So 50.
It's been used up by the city.
So 57% of that water went for municipal users is one of the things.
The amount that's been used so far, not the total.
Right, of the amount of about, we've used about 50% of the water that Mexico has allocated. And so about 57 is? Yeah, 57% is going for municipal uses. Between all of the irrigation districts. And I'm just repeating what you're saying for those audience on the online.
And you guys are also pulling from Falcon for the municipalities as well, right? Is that my understanding? That's what.
Right now, TCQ just allowed us to use San Juan water only, so we're side conversations with them regarding that,
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, wait, don't go down that
Yeah,
path.
not going down that path.
But yeah, we have a conversation coming up on that. But I think what I really want you to walk away is that the hydrology for the region is really, there's less runoff coming off. And why? I don't know. Is it a question that needs to be answered? Absolutely. Can I answer that question? It's not the IBWC's purview to do that. We're hoping that this information will build the coalition to request hydrology studies. There's grant funding out there from the federal government to really look at the science behind what is happening, right? Very similar to what the Bureau of Reclamation is doing. That's why I want to really highlight that example on the Colorado River, is that there's been significantly less runoff compared to snowpack. And as what you saw here is this is rainwater, and rainwater is even more vulnerable, okay?
There's a question here I can answer.
Okay, so you can answer? Okay, why don't you read the question, yeah.
So the question online is the historical data across decades measured by the same number of gauging stations per decade or increased number of gauging stations in recent years, thus measuring more inputs and therefore potential yield and lower storage? It's the same number of gauging stations. For the period you saw from the 80s to 2020, it's the same gauges.
And we've modernized the technology. Okay. Any other questions that we have? Yes, sir. No. This is the whole point of this.
Our current water levels at Amistad Dam, were they impacted at all by the needs or the noticeable need to fix the sinkholes out there right now? Like when they discovered those new 12,
Right.
were
So it's probably the opposite. So the low levels in the dam have impacted the number of sinkholes because there's less water to hold up the ground, right? But the sinkholes have definitely not caused lower levels.
understood.
Okay.
And the levels haven't been affected over the last 18 months because they were trying to repair the sinkholes or anything of that. It's just
Correct.
happens to be that's the poor inflow that we've currently been experiencing.
So the question is, have the repair of the sinkholes affected the low water levels? And no, they have not affected the low water levels. Does the IBWC meet with Park Service and update them about what is going on with their water levels at Amistad? They tell us that they know nothing and are told nothing, so they can't make any plans to improve the park access. Well, thank you. We have the Park Service here, and so they've definitely thrown us under the bus, and and so we will definitely do that. Bart, that's a really good suggestion, and we will definitely follow up accordingly. We have our area operations managers here, and so please, if you can arrange a meeting, we will definitely follow up. Because our lake, so this is really interesting because when I'm in South Texas, the lake is a water supply source, but here it's a public amenity. Right, it's for fishing and boating, and I think sometimes we lose track of that. And so I think this is really a good observation, Bart. So yeah, Bart. Thank you for making that observation. We will definitely follow up. And is Bart the one in the audience? No, okay, no, okay. All right. Thank you. I think we're ready to wrap up this before we get to the last presentation. Is that okay? And again, if you do have additional questions, we do have a public affairs site. We respond to every email that we get, and we do follow up. We have our last presentation, and that will be Mario Gomez, our Middle Rio Grande operations manager. He'll be talking, and Evelio, is it, I always say Siller, but is it, I don't know how to pronounce. Siller, right? Yeah. Will be presenting on kind of what we're doing in the region to benefit the region in terms of maintaining our infrastructure. So why don't you guys come on up? You know, we want people to know that we're using efficiently taxpayer dollars to maintain the infrastructure we've been entrusted to maintain.
The SOD one, and my presentation's towards the very end.
I joined.
Yeah, you joined. And it's just
Yeah, it'll be this one right here.
Well, thank you, everybody. My name is Mario Gomez. I'm the regional manager for the middle section of the Rio Grande, and I'm currently acting chief of operations. Behind me is Mr.
Evelio Sierra, Area Operations Manager for Amistad Dam Field Office.
So we've been tasked today to give you a brief overview of our Safety of Dams program, little benefits of the dams, and familiarize you with some of our dams under our portfolio and their DSAC ratings, the type of inspections that we carry out at these dams, and some of the exciting activities that Mr. Valley will present that's going on at Amistad Dam. So under the Safety of Dams program, it was authorized under the Secretary of the Army back in 1972. This was in response to a Buffalo Creek Dam failure back in West Virginia in 72 that killed 125 people. So our IBW Safety of Dams program follow these guidelines. United States Army Corps of Engineers, it's more properly known, fall under the Secretary of the Army. And we also follow the guidelines of FEMA that sets guidelines for dam safety. Given the international aspect of our dams, there's also international inspections that we carry out. So the U.S. sections and the Mexican sections get together for periodic inspections. We bring in our experts. Our experts on the U.S. side will be the Army Corps of Engineers. Sometimes we also bring in the Bureau of Reclamation. And Mexico brings in the CONAGUA, which is a federal agency that sees most of the dams in Mexico. CONAGUA stands for the National Commission of Water, and CFE, which oversees most of the power generation on the Mexican side. Benefits of dams, well, the hydropower part that gives us an opportunity for renewable and clean energy. And a big benefit is flood control and reducing flood and erosion. It protects property and lives for any of the people that live near these floodplain areas. It also gives us an opportunity for water storage, and it reduces the impact of droughts. And something very familiar here with a lot of people here in the area is, of course, the navigation, the recreation area. The DSAC, the Dam Safety Action Classification, there's 5 ratings we've adopted here, and it comes from the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Just remember, the lower the number, the higher the urgency. The higher the number, the better off you are. Under our portfolio dams, most of our dams fall under the DSAC 3 and 4. There's just one that falls under DSAC 2. Anybody remember which one that is? Yep, it's our Amistad Dam. So Falcon down lower is a little bit DSAC 3. So these are these are dams in the middle stretch of the Rio Grande, and these are our only 2 storage dams. We also have other diversion dams that divert the flows within the river. Here's a brief overview of those dams and their DSAC rating. Down lower, we got Ansaldúas and Retomal Dam with their DSAC rating, and Morelos Dam, which is in Mexico. The type of inspections that we carry out, we just recently carried out under our Safety of Dams program. We bring in the Army Corps of Engineers. It's 5-year inspections that we carry out. And they're very detailed. They looked at our steel structures. They ask us to operate our gates while they carry out some of the mechanical and electrical tests that they perform. They get underneath our bridges to inspect them. And then we also, given the international aspect of our dams, we also, again, we bring in our our counterparts from Mexico, and they bring in their technical experts. And then once these recommendations and inspections are carried out, they prepare reports, and they give us a list of recommendations that they expect us to see what we could carry out so we can plan. So this is the result of those inspections and those reports. You can see here This is for the Amistad Dam. You can see some of the O&M, some of the smaller items we can carry out with our local crew, but some of them we have to plan out as we gather up resources that we need. As you can see, the O&M work plan on the top right corner, as we plan them out for different fiscal years. In the bottom right, you can see the capital plan as we plan them out for future years. And there's also studies that they recommend, and some of the training that as they review our staff, and they tell us, hey, these type of training would be helpful. And there was also, they review our workforce, and you can see that, I don't know how we got by without an electrician, but we did get by with an electrician, but they're recommending an electrician, an engineering tech, a maintenance mechanic, and a maintenance worker, so. And you can see the list, it's a long list, 114 recommendations, and that's a big cost also, so. And this is Falcon and Ansalduas, Retamal. So we do this for all our dams as we plan and prepare for all these dams, all this work. And then our power plants. Here, I'd like you to notice is just that Amistad, while our dam is a little bit younger, but our power plant seems to be doing well. Our dam, well, not so. At Falcon, our dam seems to be doing a little better, but our power plant needs a little bit more, resources that we have to invest. And there's a little bit different rating cycle that the Corps does for the power plants. So, and we are regulated. We follow state and federal regulations. So, and they break down each of our components and they rate them and they evaluate them. And some of the exciting work that's being carried out at the dam and the power plant, Mr. Evelio will.
Thank you, Mario. I'll take over here from before we get any other questions. So really, I just want to inform the stakeholders here in this region, right, what the Amistad Dam field office has done, what they've accomplished in the year of 2024, and what's to come in the following years, right? So brief overview, accomplishments, some heavy equipment acquisitions that we acquired here at the field office, the inspections that Mr. Mario Gomez just mentioned. I'll show some pictures here. Uses, inspection recommendations that were given in this prior 5-year inspection. 2025 capital projects, deferred maintenance projects, in-house work that we've done and will continue to do, and power plant capital maintenance projects, and just prepare the region here for the 2025 flood preparedness. Of course, everyone notes here that the lake is 66 feet below conservation level, but due diligence, we need to be prepared at all times. So I'd like to start with those who have not been to the Amistad Dam infrastructure, to kind of gauge what we actually do operations and maintenance here at the dam. So for starters, we have 2 generators, each have a capacity of 33 megawatts. We have the dam concrete section with the control building in the center, which we both, Mexico and U.S., use to do flood operations from. We have 4 miles of the dam embankment, so 2 miles, but once you add both sides on upstream and downstream, it adds up to 4 miles of doing maintenance and vegetation control on the embankment. We also have 8 radio gates that we maintain and operate and make sure that those are ready for flood readiness plan. Along with those radio gates, we have 8 stop logs that we'd use to do any maintenance if the conservation level was being met at the time of doing any maintenance on those gates. We also have 5 penstocks with the associated mechanical gates. We have 4 head gates, which are roller slide type. They have a cable hoistway system. We have 2 irrigation gates, 1 hydraulic, which those who attended the site tour in the morning realize, the extensive repair that's needed there, and then 1 roller slide gate in conjunction with the bulkhead that's used for all 5 penstocks to do any maintenance. We also have on our list is 5 admin buildings, warehouse, 6 government rental houses, water storage tank, 21 hydrological gauging stations, which we do roadway maintenance and vegetation control under the cableways. And also for National Park Service and anybody who's on the water at the Lake Amistad, we do have the 28 international reservoir buoys that we do maintenance on, along with the 4 demarcation boundary markers on our bridges from International Dam down to Eagle Pass. So quite a bit. My staff size with O&M and power plant is approximately 30, with those being 7 or 8 for security, which won't do any operations and maintenance at the dam. So 2024 accomplishments, a list was given out prior to the meeting, and I'll just briefly state these. So during this past year, we were able to replace a catwalk with in-house staff. So it's a great accomplishment because now we're able to lubricate and grease the last radial gate number 8, which had not been in operation for quite some time. We implemented repairs and replacements based on the 5-year recommendations. So every 5 years we do this inspection, right? And what's been seen is, we're only able to accomplish a certain amount of recommendations throughout the 5-year cycle. So plugging away and getting ahead of those were very good accomplishments from our staff. We performed the major inspections with the Corps of Engineers and Conawa Technical Advisors, which is a huge accomplishment. Perform maintenance on water conveyance projects, which is 50 miles of hydrological gauging station road work, which is very important for our hydrotechs to get out to these remote sites and do precise measurements for our water accounting division. So also ongoing rehabilitation, which is not completed, but is set to kind of complete here towards the end of February, is the rehabilitation of the wicket gate seals and the runner cone system for the power plant. Once that's completed for generator 1, we will continue with generator 2. So, like I mentioned, all these were accomplishments. So a great round of applause for our staff from the Amistad Dam Field Office and Power Plant. So we accomplished a lot of this road work and vegetation control due to some of these heavy equipment replacements that wasn't installed, I believe, when you were enacted as commissioner. So Commissioner, thank you for this D6 dozer, the water truck, and the dump truck, which helped us achieve these goals. Thank you. 2024 accomplishments. So a lot of these repairs and replacements have been happening on the radial gates. A lot of these mechanical components are getting to their, not necessarily the mechanical component, but the components within the actual gears, gearboxes, angle back boxes. So what we're doing right now is we have our mechanics kind of breaking these components apart, replacing gaskets, bearings, relubricating, things that hadn't been done in a while. So as we do that, right, we find out that, hey, even though the inspection said you need to do this and this, we actually have to go a step further in repairing these components. So that the first line of photos there shows, how we start our mechanic working throughout the phase of those mechanical rehabilitations. And then at the end there, you'll see, the gearbox or transmission box there fully with the new corrosion coating, with rehabilitated bearings, gaskets, and new oils. The bottom photos show the gauging stations, road work, and vegetation control. As you can see, these are in remote areas. It takes about an hour, hour and a half for our heavy equipment operator to get out to these remote sites. And they're not easily accessible roads. There's winding roads that are on cliffs. So being safety while doing this type of work is paramount. So another huge accomplishment. These additional photos are other maintenance items that we do in the dam. For example, the first 2 pictures show our penstock gates, which are the roller type with chains, where we do maintenance, we bring them up, we rehabilitate them by re-lubricating the rollers, chains, make sure that there's no structural deficiencies. The third photo here shows our crane operators, setting up the necessary weights needed to do any crane work. For example, on this occasion, we prepared this crane to do a bulkhead lift for our penstocks. The next two pictures show our D6 dozer being put to use, doing some vegetation removal at the cableway. And then the bottom pictures show our reservoir buoys. Out of the 28, we have 18 still attached within the reservoir buoy, within the reservoir pool. 10 of them have become detached due to the fluctuating levels of the lake. So we do have a capital improvement plan to get those replaced soon. And then the last picture, we do have the ceramic markers that are placed at the international bridges and our dam. The Amistad 5-year inspection, which Mr. Mario Gomez touched on, these pictures kind of show, when the Corps came out here, they did some rappelling, right, to do the structural investigation on each of the gates, both on the Mexican side and the U.S. side. So also looked at the gate operability to make sure that they, operate, open and close. They looked at our penstock gates to make sure that those open and close efficiently. And here are just a couple of pictures to show what that inspection entails. Also, on the accomplishments list, we did do an underwater inspection that was provided by the Bureau of Reclamation. So on that inspection, they looked at our spillway basin to make sure that all the concrete within that basin is still intact. And on the upstream side, on the water intake structures, to look at those trash racks, that they're not deficient in any way possible. Power plant inspection, which Mr. Mario Gomez touched on, we do those every 10 years, and we were able to do that consecutively with the 5-year inspection. So what they looked at here was all the power plant inspection components, such as the generator, the turbine, the shaft, the structural components of the interior, the squirrel cage, the wicket gates, and these pictures show that. Right now, the current project that's rehabilitating the wicket gate seals is that third picture. Unfortunately, we weren't able to see that in person today because it's a contractor liability / safety for our occupants. But really what it entails, it's replacing the gate seals within those turning vanes there. And then 5-year recommendations, the critical elements on the recommendations were, make sure that our radio gates, cable tensioning is corrected. The trunnion pin being lubricated, which we're in the process of executing that project. The radio gate 1 grease line reconnection, which has been completed. And as Karla said, right, the most urgent action is, hey, let's get this rehabilitation of the sinkholes project completed. So, and that's ongoing right now in design. So 2025 capital projects. For those who attended our tour today, we actually visited the penstock locations, and we had some diagrams there shown. But so penstock 4 concrete plug is the first picture there. It literally means what it says, right? It's just adding a concrete plug there for that structural deficiency. Number 5 is the second picture, which is repairing the irrigation gate system there. There's some hydraulic issues, so having a contractor come out and repair that for us would be a paramount and much needed here. To continue to operate our dam efficiently. Radio gates, electrical panel upgrade, that's something that was listed on the recommendations, and it's something that's needed immediately as well, and it's also a capital project improvement. Deferred maintenance. So one of the projects that was listed on the recommendations, even though as an agency we've been aware that we need to catch up on some of this deferred maintenance, is the radio gates sandblasting and painting, seal replacements, anode replacements, and the cable tensioning comes up again. Dam in-house projects. So continue with the mechanical hoistway components rehabilitation, do the trunnion pin inspection and lubrication, which we'll use in-house staff with our crane. The radio gate U-bolt inspection and lubrication, which is on the back side, on the upstream side of the gate there. Continue routine maintenance. Continue with the road work and vegetation removal at all the hydro stations, buoy maintenance, and the boundary demarcation markers maintenance, along with all the other routine maintenance requirements needed for the dam. power plant capital projects, like I mentioned, we're doing the sandblasting and repainting via contractor for these wicket gates and the squirrel cage. We will continue from on to generator 2 once generator 1 is completed. And then for more of the local stakeholders here, from Del Rio down to up to Falcon, right? 2025 flood preparedness. Every year we meet binationally to do a flood workshop and just be in sync and coordinated for when we do need to go into flood operations, we're prepared, staff-wise and management side. 2025 emergency action plan meeting. So this year, we're going to do something new. Prior to the binational flood workshop, we're going to meet with the local emergency coordinators, sheriff, hopefully the judge for Valverde County, to go over the emergency action plan and inundation maps that were disseminated last year. And that's kind of, we have a tentative date of May 12th. And then lastly, every year we disseminate the 2025 flood warning notices along upstream of the Amistad and downstream of Amistad. So you'll see me personally come in and deliver to the city offices, the Valverde County offices, Maverick County offices, and any other stakeholders along the Rio Grande. That's all I have prepared. Any questions for me or Mr. Mario Gomez? Yes, ma'am.
So with all of the maintenance and repairs that are being done, how is it that we still have 114 recommendations? Or how is it that we've got to this point where our dam is, more of a dire situation than the others?
Right, so a lot of the recommendations that were coming up is the dam is 55 years old, right? We've done the routine, reoccurring maintenance, but we're getting to the point where we need to do replacements, capital improvements is what's needed there at the dam. And that's what a lot of these recommendations are coming and telling us that's what needs to happen.
Now, the DSAC rating two is not really on the O&M or the rehab because of the sinkholes that we have and having to address that. That's the main reason that rating, that we have this higher level of rating than Amistad than at any other dam. That was just like in 2024, right, where those sinkholes were
So the sinkholes were identified like back in the 90s.
94.
94. So now is when the two countries had the political will to sign the minute and agree on because of the community's outreach and the constant community input and advocacy, the funding has come forward for this. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the Asset Management Office is now going to be inventorying all of these components. And so therefore, we'll be able to put everything on an O&M plan and have a better management of this. Okay. I do want to comment. Is Ray, are you still on? Ray?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you comment a little bit on the status of the penstock 4? The reason why the penstock 5
Yeah.
is really important is because it's the lowest level of, it's the deepest in the dam. And so right now, that is on the US side, and it has been inoperable for decades, or at least a decade. And so we want to avoid those things happening, right? That's why the asset management program is really important. But we still have to fix this. And so because of that, we've lost about 32,000 acre feet of water that we would normally have access to. And so this is really a priority to get that fixed. So Ray, can you talk a little bit about what the status is?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And to preface that, we have tried actually issuing 2 contracts out to try to get the repair initiated, and we could not find a suitable contractor that met the qualifications that we needed and or price, either or. So we went back to the drawing board, and now we're getting ready to issue a new solicitation, and we are planning to get our pre-solicitation notice out by the end of February or the first week in March, and then move into actually posting the solicitation for mid-March, and our proposals hopefully being due by mid-April so that we can award by May. So at that point, what we're looking at for the contract is to repair and replace the hydraulic system so that we can actually raise the gate and have access to that water. That's why it's real critical that we get this one out as soon as possible, which we're shooting for, and get it awarded by May so we can get the work done, get the hydraulic system replaced, and get that gate operated.
So how did we, Ray, can you explain how we changed our approach so that it's not just a repetition and we have a higher probability of getting bids on this project?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. So the reason that we had, or it was kind of more complicated beforehand, is we were trying to really do the complete package and try to capture anything and everything through a report where the contractor was trying to price a project that really didn't have a lot of information, and there was a lot of risk on trying to figure out what was actually wrong. We knew from previous history that we had a system with a hydraulic system, but we wanted to fix everything that we could at one time. So what we're doing now is we're going to basically replace the hydraulic system so we can get the gate to work. We know the gate operates. It's just a hydraulic system that's not working. And then at the end, have a report that while we're down there, give us an inspection to see what you see down there, recommendations, so that we can tap onto that if we need to, based on whatever the outcome of the report is. Then we can continue to work and operate on what we need to in Pinstock 5. Right now, to get the gate operating is to get the hydraulic system replaced and replaced so we can operate the gate, have access to that water, make sure it's working. And then if there's anything else that needs to be done through a report, then we can identify those and tap into that contract.
Okay. And then there's another question here. What is the release plan for Amistad for the spring of 2025? And is there a magical number you can't draw beyond? So we don't, the release plan, we respond to TCEQ, but I think one of the questions is, since we have our water accounting area, they're starting to look at kind of looking at what are scenarios moving forward if we have a repeat of last year, and whether we will go down below power pool. So Delbert, are you prepared to answer that? If not, I can answer that.
I'm not sure where you're going.
So, okay, the projections. I'll let Isela answer that.
So we are concerned with the low levels, and as Commissioner said, we do respond to delivery requests from TCEQ. But based on past releases, right, we've done some initial projections for Amistad and Falcon. We do not, the current projections do not have us dropping at Amistad to power pool. We can possibly drop to power pool at Falcon, I believe, by August. And of course, it works as a system, right? So it really depends on how Conagua and TCEQ call for the water, because if they do want to call for more water in order to store more water at Falcon, there's a possibility we can reach power pool at Falcon. What does that mean? That just means that the amount of release we can physically make from the dam will be limited. And we have those numbers. I just don't have them off the top of my head right now. We've actually put them on our website also. So if you go to our website, it has the elevation for our power pool. It has the constraint releases there. But we do look at that, and we do look at the amount, the elevation, the amount of water we have in the reservoirs weekly to determine where we are on that. So.
And then the other question we have here from Joanne is, have you taken into consideration the costs associated with invasive mussel impacts, how this can affect operations and management?
So yes, I think it was last year that we found that there were mussels in the reservoir now. We, based on experience at other dams, such as Glen Canyon, that's already been referenced, we thought it may take a few years till it actually reached our structure. Mexico lifted a gate recently, and they did see some mussels on there. So right now we're planning that. We're looking at what kind of O&M operations we need to have, what kind of solutions we need to have. I know for reclamation, they look at ultraviolet light for that. So right now we're just in the planning phase and looking at what that cost will be, but it will definitely be part of our O&M plan going in the future now.
Yeah, and thank you for the information, Joanne. According to with the Bureau of Reclamation facilities surveyed in 2021, they spent approximately $464,000 annually on increased maintenance after the introduction of the invasive mussels or the zebra mussels. Okay. Any other questions before we conclude our meeting? Well, thank you for your troopers that stayed the entire 2 hours. I hope you found this informative. We will have another meeting around the time to update the group on the construction, right? I was really quite impressed with the quality of the questions that came forward. And for me, I love coming to these meetings because it sensitizes me to the issues that are going on. And, you know, those people down in South Texas that are sucking the life out of me, I'm always worried about their water supply, but I need to worry about the lake as your amenity, a public amenity out here. And I think it's really important for us to be cognizant of that. So thank you for bringing up those questions, okay? It says, would it be possible to get a town hall meeting with IBWC and Park Service to update the public on outlooks and plans? We'll follow up on that. And then excellent presentation. Thank you for the continued great work. Thank you all for attending. Okay, you need to leave. You need to take this gentleman.